In the other part, no, not at all. For a time I found a certain satisfaction in the Platonic eternal world of ideas, which has a sort of religious flavour and gave me a certain satisfaction. But then I came to the conclusion that that was nonsense, and I was left without any satisfaction to that set of my desires. And it remained so. So that as far as that goes, philosophy proved a washout to me, but not on the side of technical basis of mathematics.
Wasn't it about here that you entered into what you called a life of disagreements?
Yes, I disagreed first with my people about both about mathematics and about philosophy. They cared only about virtue. They thought virtue was the only thing of importance in the world. Mathematics, therefore, was unimportant because it has no ethical content. And philosophy was positively pernicious because they thought it undermined virtue. So that on that point I had a strong disagreement with my people. But as regards that, of course, that disagreement was, as far as my personal life was concerned, was solved by my living among academic people who didn't take that view, so that I got again into a circle of people with whom I was quite at home. But that was brought to an end by the First War, where I took a pacifist line. I was against the First War. I was not against the Second. Some people think that this is an inconsistency, but it isn't. I never, during the First War, said that I was against all war. I said I was against that war. And I still hold that view. I think that the First War was a mistake, and I think England's participation in it was a mistake. I think if that hadn't happened, you would not have had the communists, you would not have had the Nazis, you would have not had the Second World War, you would not have had the threat of a third. The world would have been a very much better place, I think. Germany, in the time of the Kaiser, was not uncivilized. There was a certain amount of suppression of opinion, but less than there now is everywhere except in England and Scandinavia. So it really wasn't very bad. For propaganda purposes, the Kaiser's government was represented as dreadful, but that was only talk. It wasn't really true.
Your opinions today in regard to Russia are not altogether friendly. Did you always feel that way about the Bolsheviks?
Yes, and that caused another violent disagreement. Owing to my pacifism during the First War, I'd become estranged from what you might call conventional people. And then I went to Russia in 1920 and found that I abominated the Soviet government. I thought they were dreadful people already and becoming more so, and sure to go on becoming more so. And so then I had to break with all the people who'd endured my pacifism, who all liked Russia or thought they did. So that I was left in a very great isolation at that time. But, however, I escaped some of the pain of it by going to China, where I spent a very happy year. I liked the Chinese very much. And there I found people that I could agree with and that I could like.
Any conclusions about China?
Oh, I don't know about conclusions. I don't think I came to any particular conclusions. I continue to think as I had thought before, that democracy is the best form of government where it will work. It didn't work very well in China. It wasn't working at all. And one could see that it wouldn't work there. They hadn't the political experience. But I thought it would work there in time. And I dare say it would have done if circumstances had been a little more propitious.
On your return, the focus of your interests changed, didn't it?
Yes. Owing to the birth of my two elder children, I became very much interested in education. And at first, especially in education in the very early years. I didn't like the old-fashioned schools for a number of reasons. I didn't altogether like the progressive schools, though in some respects I thought them much better than the older ones. But there were some things about progressive schools, at least about most progressive schools, that I didn't feel were right. I thought they didn't pay enough attention to instruction. It seems to me that in our technically complex world, you can't play any important part unless you have a very considerable amount of actual knowledge. And I don't think that most children will acquire much knowledge unless there is a certain amount of discipline in school. I think that the degree of discipline required for acquiring knowledge ought to be insisted upon, and isn't sufficiently insisted upon in a good many modern schools that I know.
Did you change any of your opinions in that regard?
Well, I suppose to some degree. I tried running a school of my own because I wasn't satisfied with other schools. I haven't the talents of an administrator, and I wasn't satisfied with the school that I tried to run. Fortunately, at just about that time, a certain modern school that I was interested in became, I thought, quite good enough, and I was satisfied with that. I have, I suppose, changed my opinions not only about education, but about a good many things, as a result of seeing the kind of nefarious things that people do. I think that freedom is not a panacea for all things. I think there are a good many matters in which freedom should be restrained. Some of them things in which it's not sufficiently restrained at present. In the relations between nations, there ought to be less freedom than there is, I think. And to some degree this applies in modern education too. I think that some progressive schools certainly have more freedom than you ought to have. There are some freedoms that I think are desirable in education. Now, in the old-fashioned school, if a child uses a swear word, it's thought worse than if he commits an unkind action. And that seems to be absurd. I think that clearly the unkind action matters more. And in that sort of way, I don't like the old-fashioned way. I also think that children should be free to explore the facts of life to a degree that they're not when they're brought up in an old-fashioned way. I think there should be free speech. There are a number of things that I like very much about modern education. But both in education and in other matters, I think that freedom must have very definite limitations, where you come to things that are definitely harmful to other people, or things that prevent you yourself from being useful, such as lack of knowledge. So that there are those respects in which I suppose I should lay less stress on freedom than in former times.